This is the conversation with Abhishek Majumdar. He's an award-winning playwright, director, and the arts professor of theatre at New York University, Abu Dhabi. He has written critically acclaimed plays like The Djinns of Eidgah, Rizwaan, Pah-La, and Mukti Dham, and he's also the author of the book Theatre Across Borders. In this conversation, we discuss his journey growing up, how he fell in love with theatre, and then he gives me a playwriting 101 masterclass. What are the central questions that should drive your work? How do you construct a scene? How do you rehearse? What role does the audience play? And then we also discuss whether theatre should get political. This is no time. If you like what you see, then do hit subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, rate 5 stars in Apple Podcasts. This project takes a lot of my time, money, and effort. It's my full-time job now. So if you'd like to see it continue, please consider making a donation on Patreon. You can buy Super Thanks on YouTube. You can join as a member on YouTube. If not through monetary channels, do consider sharing these episodes, leaving your likes and comments. All forms of engagement, they really go a long way. For other forms of love and support, you can follow this channel on Instagram or Twitter, or follow me personally. And now, it's no time.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Oscar Wilde once said, the stage is not merely the meeting place of all the arts, but is also the return of art to life. You grew up in the JNU campus watching open-air rehearsals of Habib Tanveer's Naya Theatre, watched a lot of Gadwali Ramleela, went to watch a lot of plays at the National School of Drama, Shakuntalam Cinema. So I want to start with the origin story. When you look back now, when you look back on your childhood, what was it about theatre that attracted you so strongly to it? What was so appealing about theatre that you fell in love with it from such a young age?
I first of all should commend you on your research.
We just started.
Yeah,
This is it. This is the peak.
Incredible. It's so relieving to be in conversation with a well-researched host. So
This is the best
you.
question. Iske baad ab kuch nahi hai. So save the compliments.
You know, I think in my childhood there was a lot of music in my house. My mother and sister, both of them learned Hindustani music and Rabindra Sangeet. And my mother's Guruji used to come home and teach. So actually I grew up around a lot of music. And I don't think particularly I was aware of any liking or any special fondness. It was really more of an inconvenience that this thing is at home. You know, it was like that. I think as I grew up, I realized how important the arts in general were for me, particularly music, because my mother also sang every day. Her voice is something that has stayed with me throughout my life. So I think she and her voice and her teacher, my sister singing, that was really the inroad to the arts. There was somehow a lot of theatre around us. And there is a very interesting statistic that, you know, India has the largest number of registered theatre companies in the world, which I discovered like 2-3 years ago. And it's not that there is a huge professional circuit, right? But there's a massive amateur circuit. So every local club, every Durga Puja Pandal, every Ganesh Chaturthi, everybody has something. Every railway club has a theatre thing. So that somehow is still vibrant, I think. But it was also vibrant when I was growing up. I think that had a very deep impact. Now there are words for it. It seems like it was a very diverse exposure to theatre of different kinds, different languages. It seems like there was politics inside it, and magic and mythology, and all of this was included. At that time, obviously I had no real articulation of it. But I think children love the theatre for the simple reason that things don't become what they seem like in the theatre, right? Like somebody appears and says, I am a snake, and then you start to believe that they're a snake. And then someone becomes a tree, and somebody becomes Hanuman, and then someone becomes something else, and you kind of go with it. I think that playfulness, the reason why we call something a play, in the theatre, I guess I was attracted to that. And the playfulness in the theatre was also very meaningful. The stories were very meaningful, very interesting. There's always something anarchic about Habib Tanveer's plays and the Ram Leela, and somebody will suddenly start questioning the protagonist. This sort of thing, I think, for a child is quite fascinating, because you see people break rules, and others applaud the breaking of rules, which every child wants to do. Every child wants to break rules and be applauded for it. I guess that was one of the things.
You are an accomplished playwright now. You're a professor as well. You've trained in Lecoq-based physical theatre at the London International School of Performing Arts. Can learning the craft, learning the technique, breaking theatre down as a science, can that kill the kid inside you that fell in love with theatre for very primal, instinctive reasons? Is it possible for you to now sit back and just enjoy a play like the kid did, and stop your brain from trying to dissect the narrative, the structure, constraints, stage time, all of those different technical items? Is it possible to just sit back and enjoy it like the kid?
Yeah. I mean, I think I enjoy it more now than before. Because training in the arts, or I think proper training in the sciences as well, is a training in understanding wonder. That you are interested in something that fundamental. I don't think if you're a physicist of optics, you stop finding a rainbow beautiful, right? You continue to find magic in that, although you know that it's an optical illusion.
There's a Walt Whitman poem about the learned astronomer. I don't know if you've come across it.
No, I haven't.
Where this professor was teaching about astronomy, astrophysics, and the student was just like, there's so many numbers and graphs, and he went down and looked at the sky and he said, we're losing the beauty in just studying all these numbers and graphs. I don't know if you feel the same way with theatre.
I don't feel that way at all.
Okay.
I think, in fact, what happens is that, for me, the reverse is true. When I did not go to drama school, I enjoyed theatre very much. After going to drama school, I think I have been able to enjoy and then understand and then enjoy a lot more. I think when you look at the stars and you're learning, I'm just going by the poem that you've quoted.
The learned astronomer.
I suppose there is a time when you're learning a grammar where, like learning anything new, one can feel that one is sort of stuck in the cogs and wheels of it. But that's an essential step to learn anything. I don't think that takes wonder away. That, in fact, next night when you look at the stars and you know that, oh, actually, you know what? That particular thing is this planet. And there's still so much mystery to it, although I understand it more. I mean, the discoveries in astronomy have not stopped people from wondering. In fact, the universe has become even more magical after those discoveries. I think it's the same with the arts. Yeah.
You've received another very unique form of training. You brought up your mother and your sister and that mild inconvenience that you had at home. But you said in the past your mother used to often talk to you in questions. And she used to often, after you've watched a play or watched a movie or read a book or heard an album, she used to ask you and your sister your opinion of it at the dinner table, and not just ask you for your opinion, but ask you to give reasons for that opinion. How important is this dialectical form of inquiry of every content that you watch? I've fallen victim to this, where I just jump from one movie to the next, one book to the next, one museum to the other, or one YouTube video to the next. I go months without taking a moment to just pause and think about what was presented to me, what's my opinion on it, should I stretch the ideas, debate the ideas, do I agree, disagree? And I feel there's so much content out there now, there's an influx of content and this access to it, that I just feel this constant pressure of having to jump from one to the next, and I don't take a moment to pause. So first question was, how important is this dialectical form of inquiry? And then the second is, do you think it's suffocating under this massive influx of content and access to content that's out there?
It's a great question. I think this dialectical relationship is important to me. I find it interesting to talk to people about what they have seen. My daughter and I do this all the time. She's 9 and both of us watch a lot of performances together. Thankfully, we are in this beautiful art center where you are actually shooting this. We have a lot of performances from around the world which play here. And we are both members of the Arts Center, so we watch a lot of shows. And invariably, we have a conversation afterwards. What was it like, and what was fun, what wasn't fun, and all of those things. And I find that in our conversation, my dialogue with my daughter, we have graduated from talking about what we like and what we don't like to what is interesting, in the sense that to differentiate between art and production value, right? So sometimes things that are not particularly finished or beautiful can have great meaning, as opposed to some things which are really well produced. The converse can also be true. I mean, there are things that are well produced and have meaning. So I'm really enjoying that conversation, which I started with my mother, which I'm now continuing with my daughter. I think this thread to me is very interesting. And she enjoys talking about it as well.
What does a 9-year-old find interesting in theatre?
So many things. I think she finds comedy very interesting. Primarily, anything that makes her laugh on stage. She loves it, absolutely. She likes lighting, good lighting. I remember when she was like 3.5, from her play school, they had brought her here to watch a matinee show of some kind of children's play. And she walked out of it after like 10 minutes. And then I asked her in the evening, but what happened? Why did you walk out? She said the lighting wasn't good. I was like, my God, that's really intense. But, so she's particularly sensitive, I think, to the lighting. But, like she watches plays or shows with her friends, which she likes a lot. I think that's a very important part of the theatre, right? Like, who is your community? Who are you watching it with? I think she definitely enjoys watching plays more with her friends than with me, because they are her age, they are her friends, right? So I think this dialectical thing is mode of thinking about something is at least very enjoyable to me. I have to ask my daughter someday when she grows up that did she find it interesting then?
Or an inconvenience.
Or maybe she'll be on a podcast one day and say, my father, it was completely an inconvenient thing to do.
Life comes full circle.
Yeah. But I really don't know the answer to the other question you have asked. I'm very curious about it. About the amount of content that is available today. I don't know how are we receiving it. I think the number of books that I have in my house, just books, forget about, is probably 5 times of what we used to have in our house when I was growing up. Right? So I must have read many, many more books than potentially my mother did, although she was a very big reader. But I don't know if I know those books as well as she did. She probably knew those 30 books much better than the 150 books that I know on the surface.
You read them multiple times, maybe.
She must have read them, and she must have had a relationship to those books through life. Whereas I don't know if we have that. Like she sang Tagore's poetry every evening. We had an organ, a church organ at home. So she used to play that and sing. Now when I think about her singing, I think she understood the meaning of the poetry very deeply because she had sung it so many times. And as she aged, her relationship to that poetry also changed. In my case, I think I have access to so much poetry, right? From like Indian to Chinese to Japanese, whatever, all of us have. I don't know if I have that deeper relationship as she did with hers. I have no way of knowing at the moment. So I really don't know whether the influx of this kind of content has been helpful or not. But I do think what is happening with universities, we are trying to, some of us have really changed the way we create syllabus. There was a time when a lot of our syllabus used to have a lot of plays, a lot of music, because content was suddenly so easily available. I think now we are also moving to a point where we are saying, no, we are going to read one play for 3 weeks. And we are not going to do a play a week just because we have access to it. I think these are also shifts that all of us as a society are making. And we have to see what the results are. I don't know.
Personally, it's been such a conflict between, like, you have this mantra that you often say that you should read every play 3 times. First read it non-stop, then read and stop in the middle, then read it non-stop again. And that deeper level of understanding you'll get by the 3rd attempt will be far more than the first attempt. That's true. But I always have this conflict between, okay, should I use that time to like expose myself to a diversity of ideas and looks rather than the same play? Okay, let's dive right into a playwriting 101 masterclass, playwriting for dummies. Let's assume I want to write my first play, but I have no idea what to do. I don't know where to start. Complete rookie, never written a play before. I'm in the presence of an accomplished playwright, a professor as well. So for the next hour, I just want to pick your brains on ABCs of playwriting. How does that sound?
Great. Okay. Let's go for it.
Let's do it. So first thing, I've sat down and I'm trying to write my play. And the first obstacle that's in front of me is trying to identify the central theme or the core of my work, or what will be the driving factors. You've said in your book, Theatre Across Borders, in time I realized that at the heart of every great play lies a question. These questions are sometimes realized effectively and sometimes not so much. However, without these questions, a play loses its significance in its own time, let alone in history. And then you said there are 3 central questions that often drive your work. So I want to explore each one separately. You go on to say in the book, the first question that has often driven me is, what is the invisible? So let's pause here. What is this question? What does it mean? And then what is the invisible?
Shall we go back a little bit to your 101 scenario?
Okay.
Before we come to this question. Because this is not a 101 question, you know. I think what is the invisible is a more detailed one, you know. I think basically what I'm trying to say, what I want to say is that writing your first play is not a difficult thing. Writing your second play is a difficult thing, you know. Because the first play can come out of various things that one has lived through. I think any creative person fundamentally is trying to express something. So if you write your first play and you say, okay, I see a stage, for example, and I close my eyes and I see someone doing something, right? You probably see, I don't know, you and your friends trying to, you know, build a sandcastle.
Everyone has one play within them that they write in their entire life.
Yeah, that you can write.
Right.
You know, so you start saying, you know, there's a boy who's 15 years old and he sits with it and he builds a sandcastle.
What's the story I want to tell the most?
Yeah. And then you say, okay, and then some people arrive and they break that sandcastle.
You know you know my first play already.
Done.
This is it.
So they
How did you know?
Now there's an argument. There's some kind of conflict, you know. And once that happens, someone's mother calls them home and there is probably a festival at home. And now while the festival is going on, that child realizes that outside my home is a different world where there are some boys who can break my sand dune, which is different from the thing at home where my sand dune will last. Like, this is the most fundamental conflict that a human being faces from the time they're 9 months old, right? The day you realize that my mother and I are 2 different beings, drama begins for human beings, because suddenly, oh my God, this person is not me. And I have to somehow love them and also separate from them at the same time. That's it. That's all of, if you take the history of, I think, literature and drama, it will come down to that one simple conflict that we have from the time we are 9 months old, right? The challenge is the second play always. Because the first play you will write, if you're really interested in producing and getting there, you will read it to your friends and family, and some people will give you feedback, you'll change it. Then you will work on, in a space, you'll rehearse it, you'll add some music and lights, and you will do some kind of production of it. And which might be very good, because one has lived for a certain number of years before making that first work. I think after that is when the challenge starts, and God forbid if the first one was successful. Then the second one becomes even more difficult, because you can get trapped in the success of the first. Getting trapped in success is infinitely more dangerous than getting trapped in failure. So now then, when you're in the second one, there are some things to be asked. And I think a fundamental question is that what do you want to do as an artist? Right? That's the sort of macro question which includes all these other questions that I might have written earlier. Because suddenly you are now an artist of some kind, having produced one work of art. Even if you haven't produced it, if you've just written it and read it at home, by creating art, you are some type of artist. Now comes the real challenge, because you have to develop the craft to say something that you haven't said before. Till your first play, you haven't said anything. So you can say whatever you want. You don't really have a conscious craft, but you have craft because of what you have seen, stories you've heard at home. Everybody has a sense of drama, right? If you ask somebody, how was your day? What did you do today? They will tell you that story in some order. Somebody will say, I woke up, I brushed my teeth, etc., etc., etc. Somebody will start with, I had an accident. And then they will construct it. These are all actually different structures of drama that we follow. So this is not very difficult. The difficult thing is then to say that, okay, now how to do it consciously, which is, I think, where, this question comes up of what is the invisible, which is like a sub-question of what I want to do as an artist. What I mean by this is just very simply that when I was growing up, all my training in school, college was based mostly in mathematics and physics, and I studied abstract algebra in college. That was my most preferred subject. And I think I was interested because I always had this feeling that there's something in school that they're not telling me. There seems to be more to this, but somehow they're not telling me this thing. Like, how did we move suddenly one day from numbers to calculus?
Right.
And what happened in between? Of course, I get it that there are some formulas, and if you know those 20 things, but what is it really? Similarly, I think physics is one such subject where I think feelings are like that. We are aware of how we are feeling, but when feelings repeat, you feel sorry if your ice cream falls, and you feel sorry when someone dies. Are they the same kind of sorry? Is the intensity any different for a 7-year-old? Sometimes, when there's a death in the family, the 7-year-old is still playing. They haven't even registered. But the ice cream falls, the 7-year-old is crying. So there is something behind this which is going on. And I think one of the things for me that art is very good at is to explore this thing that we are not saying, this thing that we are not able to articulate, to explore subjectivity, I think. Mainly, I think when I'm saying what is the invisible is to explore what is the subjective in human life, which is not visible to us, because it's not one thing, it's many things influence why we feel sorrow, why we get over something, why we feel happy about something which has nothing to do with us. Sometimes in life, we are so happy when something good happens to someone else who we don't even know. Sometimes we are so happy when something terrible happens to someone else who we don't even know, right? Why is this? What is this about? So I think this is the kind of thing which the invisible leads us to. Society is full of invisible forces. Economics is full of invisible forces, and life itself. I think, there is a huge similarity between arts and religion, which is both things ask the same question. They try to provide an answer of some kind to where did I come from, how should I live here, and where will I go. All religions do this. All art tries to address it. Of course, we arrive at very different answers and our processes are very different. But I think these are the kind of eternal questions. And one such eternal question is, what is the invisible around me as a human being that is driving my world. So that influences, I think, my work.
You've used this device quite often in all your work. Djinns of Eidgah, Rizwaan, notable examples. It's like you mentioned, it's like dark matter in physics or negative space in design, or even the use of silence, which I think you've explored in the 9 kinds of silence. You also teach a course at NYU called Silence. I don't know if it's about the same topic. Often the absence of something does a much better job of conveying what you're trying to convey, rather than if it's actually visible or tangible in front of you, right?
Yes, I think so. I think we are very driven by things that are absent.
Yeah, it's such an interesting insight. Let's move to the second question. Once a professor took you and your class to a village, and he took you to the side where the Dalits lived. And when you were talking to one of the villagers, you noticed that he wasn't even looking in the other direction. And when you asked him why, he said, I'm not even allowed to look in the direction where the quote-unquote upper caste villagers lived. And on your way back, you asked your professor, how do these villagers vote if they're not even able to look in that direction? And your professor said, these are the type of questions I want you to ask, because it's very easy to sit in Delhi and have an image of the world and a set of assumptions.
Yeah.
But that's very far from the ground truth. And that incident left such a mark on you that it planted the seed for the second question, which is, what is a society? So let's pause here again. What is this question? What does it mean? And then what is a society?
I don't know what is a society, hence the question.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, he was a great professor. His name was Dr. Pepin, who used to teach a course called Societal Analysis and Development Alternatives. And he did this great thing. He took all of us and said, before I teach you anything, let me show you what are the different types of India for you to think about development. Like whose development, for what, in what way. I think it was completely life-changing, those sessions with him. Because all of us, I think, believe that whatever I live inside is a society, is complete unto itself. Even I grew up the same way, thinking the same way. So we also have general opinions about the world based on whatever is my society, whatever is my experience. And we place a lot of value to this, like sometimes in a debate or argument, somebody says, but my experience is this. And it's like you can't say anything after that. It's the end of the line, my experience. But unfortunately, my experience is not everything. It just is simple. It is important for me. One can feel good or bad or whatever for me. But I think a society is a far more complex thing. There is so much of inequality in our society, world over. And we have so many structures of power, be it political or social or religious, or, all kinds, which enhance, they magnify those inequalities. Just the simple notion that almost in every formal religion, you have a belief that it is superior than the others. It's a completely bizarre construct to think that there is a God who has created me, and because this God has created me, this God is the only or the most or the superior or whatever the concept is. It's a baffling idea. But this is not just with religion, it is with a lot of atheist conceptions of the world as well. So as a writer, I'm very interested in looking at how different kinds of societies are. Because each type of society has its own truth, which is formed in relation to other truths. And it also has a truth for its own time. Right? Like, if we look at India, let's look at just North India, for example. What it was before the Buddhist rulers was very different than in the Buddhist rule, then in the Islamic rule, then in, again, the Hindu rule, then the British, and so on and so forth. And none of this affected everybody equally. All of this affected different people. So their moral values of what was accepted or what is not accepted is very different. if you read the different Ramayanas which are there in our country, each Ramayana, the Kamban Ramayana, the Tulsi Ramayana, the Valmiki Ramayana, they all have slightly different moral compass, where the story of Ram has been suited for whatever moral compass the writer wants to provide. Now, today to read that and say that is the absolute truth is baffling. It's a bizarre thing that I don't know how grown-ups do that. How do you raise your children if you think like that? But it's true that it shapes our society. It shapes what we value, and I'm interested in that. I'm deeply interested in examining different societies to the best of my knowledge, of course. Yeah, does that answer your question?
It does answer the question. I guess this raises the age-old question of how much can you learn in a classroom and how much can you learn from life itself? How much weightage would you put? If I want to become a successful playwright, how much is theory and how much is life experiences itself?
All of this is one. I think there should not be for a person who's trying to learn anything. I don't think there is any real difference in a classroom, to the street, to the tea shop, to the argument with your uncle, like to reading a book. All of this is the same subject, basically. I think the challenge with university is that it sometimes places so much emphasis on grades and these kind of in a way completely arbitrary
metrics,
scales, and which also change with time, with place, with location, that it comes in the way of learning. But in a place like NYU in Abu Dhabi, thankfully, we also have a lot of processes which come in the way of learning. But what is really good, one of the great things is that all our classrooms are encouraged to have field visits and visits by people and take the students out. And, I have taught so many classes in so many different places and not in the classroom because they've interacted with so many other people, places, things. That part of it is very interesting. Now, of course, NYU is a well-funded type of institution. You also find this in some schools and universities in India where maybe the resources aren't so many, but society is open to this kind of exchange. So I think a teacher or a student has to think of the classroom as just one dot in the line. It's not the whole line. Yeah.
And you've said this, you often use plays to immerse yourself in the story of a particular community and their tradition, completely try to find their truth. And I think that's dominant in your work. Let's move to the third question. Which patterns are beautiful? You know the drill. Why this question? What does it mean? Which patterns are beautiful?
Yeah, this is actually my favorite question out of the questions that I framed in my life. I think there are lots of patterns in the world. There are architectural patterns. There are behavioral patterns. We increasingly look out of our planet into the sky and realize that there are patterns, even out there. Things are repeating. There are patterns of space and there are patterns of time. Both are true. We can observe this by just looking at our own life. There are things that we have repeated, virtues and non-virtues, both we repeat. We can look at an animal, we can look at a city like Dubai, where you're from. It's a city of extremely wondrous patterns. You can stand at any point of time, anywhere in Dubai, and you will see an intricate scale of patterns. I think urbanization follows a certain kind of pattern. And I think these patterns, whether they are behavioral or linguistic or whatever kind, they're hugely fascinating for me. Because essentially, I think any temporal art, film, theater, music, anything that happens in time is like a Lego which you have here, which is a Lego of pattern. You repeat something over a certain frequency, and you have a composition. That's the principle of music. So as a writer or as a playwright or as a director, one is always trying to look at what are these patterns that will get repeated? What is the composition? And when you're in the theater, you're looking at patterns across sound and visual and story and theme, across all these elements, to be able to create something which is coherent and yet surprising. Right? I think that's sort of something we enjoy in an artwork, where it's coherent and yet we are surprised by it. So I guess that's where that comes from.
I think these questions are really helpful. You've said in the previous interview that writing a play is like cartography. It's like creating a map,
Yes.
giving it to someone and saying, you go where you want to go with this. And I think these questions are helpful in creating that map, the outline of that map. Let's say I've used these central questions to create my second play and the core of it, the soul of it. And now I want to create the mantle, or so to speak. Now I want to build on top of it. I want to construct specific scenes. And you've devised an engine that you use in rehearsals and for constructing scenes that has 3 components: the objective, the constraint, and stage time. So let's break down this engine as well. What is the objective? What is the constraint? What is stage time? And with the help of an example, hopefully, can you show how you can actually construct a scene using these 3 components?
Yeah. I mean, it's by no means I want the audience to feel that there are, these are like laws of physics.
Yeah.
Because, each one makes art their own way. I think as far as when I was in drama school, because I was in a physical theatre school as well, like as you mentioned, the Lecoq School, it was very improvisation based. A lot of things came out of improvisation. So I was trying to find some kind of way in which I could enter a rehearsal space and create conditions in which good improvisations could happen, right? That's where I thought of this engine, mainly because, again, I was a physics student, so maybe I had some kind of preconceived love for, creating principles.
Right.
But again, like I said, these are not, even laws of physics are not eternal, as we have seen. So it's really simple. I'll give you an example and try to illustrate it. Let's say you are improvising a scene from Romeo and Juliet, right? Romeo and Juliet have to meet.
How do you improvise when there's the stories like so well told?
I mean, you can do it in 5,000 ways. Like all stories have only 2 things. People either meet or they part.
For at least Romeo and Juliet, there's at least like a narrower set of constraints because there's a certain way only the story is going to progress, right? Whereas if you're writing an original work, world is the oyster, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, true. And at the same time, if you take the scene where Romeo and Juliet meet, and you have to stage that scene, you could stage it in 1 million ways.
Right. Okay.
Right? So let's say you're looking at that scene. I'm just also taking a scene that already exists so that everybody is aware of a scene.
Okay.
We can apply this to any scene where 2 people have to meet, but just for the sake of illustration. So something that has to happen in that scene is that these 2 characters have to end up understanding that they are attracted to each other.
That's the objective.
Yeah. Like if that doesn't happen, I'm talking about Romeo and Juliet meeting, the famous balcony scene. If that doesn't happen, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. But if at the end of that scene, I feel that, does Juliet understand that Romeo likes her? Is Romeo really in love with Juliet? Or is he actually in love with the nurse who's behind her? Then you just can't go anywhere with it. You absolutely have to establish that they love each other. You understand they love each other, and they understand that they love each other, right? It's a basic thing. Okay, so that's your objective. So you tell your actors, or when you're writing the scene, you know that this is something that must happen in this scene. I can do it in 2 lines, 3 lines, 55 lines, with a lot of dialogue, less dialogue, with dialogue in verse, dialogue in prose, with only music, with dancers, with animation, with whatever you want. But this is something that must happen in that scene.
Are the dialogues not written already? You're already receiving a written
You could
play.
do Romeo and Juliet today with no dialogues as well, right? You could take the scene and do it with 2 dancers and a great musician, and it would still work.
So even if you have the script with you, you say, forget it.
Yeah,
Just do your
absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, people reinterpret classics like that all the time, you know. I'll tell you something about classics a little later. But yeah, so like that's an objective, right? What was the second thing that I mentioned in my engine?
The constraint.
The constraint. Great. So the constraint in the scene is that nobody else should find out that they have met, other than the one person who's with Juliet in her room, who has an idea that somebody is there and she's talking to someone, right? So now, immediately you have a very playful scenario where nobody else should find out. So it's not a public, it is a, often great scenes are those where private things happen in public spaces and public things happen in private spaces, right? So you have to have the most intimate conversation, but they are not in a bedroom, they're not in their living room. They are actually, this guy is standing downstairs and she's at the balcony, but they have to have, you automatically have a constraint, right? Or a couple which is in their bedroom, but actually they're arguing about caste. And they can no longer have a private conversation. The great scene between Othello and Desdemona. What they're arguing about is race, actually, which is something that should happen in public. But their bedroom is now become a public space. It's no longer a private space, right? It's the flip of the Romeo and Juliet scene in Othello. So, you have that objective, you have this constraint, right? What was the third thing I mentioned?
Stage time.
Stage time. So you have some kind of notion of how long this should last, right? Should this last for 10 minutes, 5 minutes? Is this the whole show? Do I have a 1-hour play in which only Romeo and Juliet meet? And that's the whole play. If you watch Kathakali, you can have 1 hour in which Arjuna looks at Draupadi's eyes. That could be an hour and it's riveting. You cannot take your eyes off.
Bharatanatyam, smelling of flowers.
Flower can be, exactly. Bharatanatyam is a great example of that. Kabuki, no. A lot of Asian forms are about expanding time.
Right, not compression.
And a lot of Western forms are about compressing time. Right. I mean, it's like a classic difference in some sense. So this example that I gave you from Romeo and Juliet has many answers to the stage time, many answers to the objective, many answers to the constraint. Now let's say a different director comes in and says, my objective is to actually show the violence between these two families as they're meeting. That's what I want to land. How violent it is. My constraint here is that it will completely be in sign language. That actually Romeo and Juliet cannot say a word except in sign language. And my stage time is going to be an entire night. And the audience can come in and go and walk out and have something, come back again. The show is going to be about how difficult it is for two people to meet when the world is at war. And it could be, I think it could be a great show for a whole night. So these three things, I think I'm in different cultures and traditions, they might be known by other things. But the constraint, the objective, and the stage time, if one is able to at least think about it, I think it's a good preparation for writing a scene. It's a good preparation for a rehearsal. It's a good preparation to create a scene. Keeping in mind that one has to be open to what happens while you're writing and what happens when you're rehearsing. This is good for us to get started. This is good for us to know that when things are going here and there, to bring it back to focus. But creativity is about the accidents that happen while you're making something. The surprises that it throws up for us. Something that I did not expect in a rehearsal or I did not expect while writing a scene. That one has to be open to. while preparing through this lens.
When you brought up the constraints, so far you brought up artistic constraints. Let's say a scene has to be mimed or has to be done in silence or has to be in a song, for example. And maybe this is a digression, but what about real world constraints? How important is it? Because theatre in most places has limited access to funding, production budgets are quite low, resources are limited. How important is it to filter what you're writing through the lens of realism, pragmatism? You said in the previous interview, because you grew up watching the Naya Theatre and Ramlila, you didn't really grow up with the concept of realism because these were grand stages, right? Almost anything seemed possible. But for aspiring writers, how important is it to actually filter what I'm writing through the lens of what's logistically, financially possible? Because there's no way of actually achieving it, why write it down? Or do you think that's sacrilege? Write the best story possible and then work backwards, reverse engineer, you land at something, aim for the sky, land at the clouds.
Yeah. I think, theatre is an abstract form, like painting is. When you're painting a picture, you have painters who replicate a photograph as is. And then you have Picasso who does cubism, right? One is not more expensive than the other to make. Both things need paint and color and canvas. What is really behind it is how a person can imagine the canvas. I think that is true for the theatre as well. When you're writing a scene, there might be, you want to see an aeroplane. There are 1 million ways of doing an aeroplane on stage. And many of them actually don't cost anything. Because the stage is so much about how we imagine something as opposed to realistically what it is. Every story has its own world. We need to believe the thing in that world. There is a great play, a Kuriyatam play, where, Arjuna is meditating and the gods are very scared that, he will win all the powers. And they send an apsara to divert him from his meditation. So he's sitting and he's under a tree and the gods arrive and they send this woman and she's dancing and he's not affected. Then suddenly Narada appears and Narada says, look at her beautiful eyes. And Arjuna has heard it, but he's not opened his eyes. Look at her beautiful hands and her posture and this. He's completely unfazed. And then suddenly Narada says, so since none of this is working, suddenly he says, oh, but what is this thing now? And immediately he opens his eyes to look at what is this thing? Like what is the exception? What is the thing that is not beautiful about this? Now this entire performance is done by one actor. The Arjuna, tree, gods, Narada, the woman who's done all of this.
One person.
Is one person. And you cannot for a moment say that I did not see Narada or I did not see the gods or I did not see the woman. You will see everything. So I'm saying that there are also different styles in which different kinds of reality can be achieved. So while writing a play, I don't think one should worry too much about it. While realizing it, of course, theatre is a very practical art. And so one has to think of what is relevant to one's society and what kind of forms does one have access to. Right? Yeah.
What role does the audience play in theatre? One of the distinctive qualities of theatre is that it's a live medium.
Yes.
So there's an audience as compared to maybe a movie or TV. And you said in a previous interview that you often monitor the audience's reaction in the first run of the play to see what's landing. And then you go back and try to refine that work. It's very similar to an open mic by a comedian where they test out material, see what jokes are landing, and then go and hone their set. What role does the audience play when let's say the audience signs up for the first run of the play? Are they signing a two-way? are they signing a contract to be a part of a two-way feedback loop where they're being denied the best possible product because the story is still rough around the edges, but as compensation, they get to be part of the creation process. They get to shape what the story is going to look like, or what's the best possible version of the story? Or do you think I'm giving them more importance? In fact, when the audience comes in to watch a play, they should really surrender to what is being presented and not try to control it.
Yeah. I think, look, the first time a play performs to an audience in a theater is actually not the first time the play is performing to an audience. Because you build in a lot of previews before you actually open the show. That's part of the theater. Because there is a very big difference between, the way in which audience feedback is thought of in a world of customer satisfaction versus the way you think of an audience in the art form. In the world of customer satisfaction, your job is to please the audience. In my world, my job is to be in dialogue with the audience. I can be liked or disliked. That's not a problem. But I can't get away. I can't have a stage moment which doesn't land as anything. Right? Which neither offends, nor pleases, nor moves, nor is neither hated nor liked. That's when there is a problem with my craft.
But you're also aiming to be disliked?
One can be disliked. Of course. Why won't you be? If you're in a real relationship with anyone in this human, society, you can be disliked, right? It's a completely normal reaction.
But for people who are paying money and taking time out of their day to come watch what they're considering some form of entertainment,
yeah,
is it the right thing to do? To actually, the end objective is to make the audience completely despise you by the end.
The end objective is to have a dialogue.
Okay. So even if they come out completely angry, pissed off.
There are so many people who have disliked something about some play and loved something else, or they have hated one play and they have liked something else. Now, entertainment is also many things, right? All entertainment is not the same. Just like all food is not the same. All relationships are not the same. All entertainment is not the same. If I go to play a video game, and if I have to give it a rating out of 5, I won't use the same parameters as I would if I go to the Louvre to see an exhibition of art, right? If I go to, if I read a book, if I read a novel, versus if I'm reading the Top Gear magazine on cars, I won't use the same parameter to evaluate both.
Yeah, horror movies versus a rom-com.
Yeah, it's just different things have different ways in which we engage. And I think for the theater, for at least the kind of theater I'm in, it's really important for me to have a real dialogue with my audience. In fact, I'm looking for a lot of diversity within my audience. Where people from different social groups can come and watch. We spend a lot of time in our shows, our producers, in creating opportunities for people from different backgrounds to be able to come and watch plays. So we buy out a lot of tickets for places where they cannot afford to come and watch the show. So that these people who usually wouldn't meet outside the theater in an equal footing can actually sit next to each other and watch a play.
Yeah, you've said this in the past that often theaters created for people who can't even afford to watch it or don't have access to it.
And it's so important, even if people who can afford to watch it, they really need to watch theater next to people who cannot afford to watch it. You will watch a completely different play if you sit and watch with a person who's from a different background than yours. Linguistic, social, economic, political, gender, whatever. But a different background. You'll watch a different play. Because you're always you can watch a film alone. Just imagine this. You go to a cinema hall, there's a great film, you sit and watch alone. Nobody else is there. You have a great experience. You come out. But even the world's greatest play, can you imagine going and watching it alone? It'll turn you nuts if you have to sit for 2 hours just alone in the theater receiving this. Because you watch theater as a society. You never watch theater alone. You always watch it. You're affected by who is watching with you. Right?
That's as much a part of what's happening on stage.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think like you were talking about stand-up comedy.
Right.
Imagine doing a show for just one person versus you have like 10 people. Itself makes such a big difference, right? So that is a very big part of the relationship to an audience. So when I say that, we watch what the audience is doing, it's really more in previews than in the actual show. But, many of our shows run for, more than 2-3 years. And the show keeps evolving. People keep changing things inside it. It travels. Like sometimes we have to have subtitles because it's playing in a place where people don't speak the language of the show. Sometimes that also makes a lot of difference. You're doing a play in, say, Kannada or Tamil, in a place where people speak Kannada or Tamil, or Hindi in Hindi, versus you move to, you're performing a Hindi play in Germany with subtitles in German. Now I am watching this play. I wrote a play which was performed in Tibetan. It's for a Tibetan company, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was touring in Germany and Austria last year. So I was on that tour. It was such a baffling thing for me sitting in the audience because I was watching a show in Tibetan, which I don't understand. The subtitles are in German, which I don't understand. There are Tibetan actors and there are German audiences. I'm like one person who's sitting there, who's the writer of this show, who understands neither of these languages, but is sitting and watching it. It's a totally different experience to watch a show like that compared to... So what you're looking for while you're with the audience there is very different than if I'm, watching a Hindi play in Delhi, for example.
Can I zoom in on this? What role does language play? Because when you were studying, you've often said that there was a moment where you were struggling to find your internal image.
Yeah.
And then one day, a Polish friend took you to watch a Polish group and
Yes.
they were performing in that language. And when you were watching them, something clicked inside you about the power of language. Next day in class, you spoke in Bangla for the
Yes.
first time, and all your friends even mentioned to you that there's a certain shift that they've noticed. So what role does language play? When you wrote Dwipa, you wrote it in Bangla.
Yeah.
It was performed in Kannada. There was an English version as a bridge. Does a play reside in a language? Does language house a certain story? Does it become a primary driving influence, or is language just a tool? Any story can be written in any language, doesn't matter.
Your research is very good. I don't know why you were underplaying your good research in the first question.
I was just saying, hold on and wait till you see if there are 10 questions which are researched or not.
It's very well researched. I think, let me answer it in two ways. As a maker, language is very important, right? I write those plays in English which are about societies which don't speak Hindi or Bangla. So my play about Kashmir is in English because I don't speak Kashmiri. Or the play about Tibet is in English because I don't speak Tibetan. But if I have to write about a world where people speak Hindi, then I would write it in Hindi or Urdu or Bengali, right? Now, of course, all of this gets translated to other languages and other companies do it in whatever, like the Hindi plays happen in English, the English play happen. That's a different matter. But while writing, it is important for me to know which world I am inside. What is the world that inhabits the story? I'm not talking about the audience, but where are the characters from? I think we think different things in each language. The thoughts I have in Hindi are not the thoughts I have in English. English is a language which, of course, I have learned right from school, and so I don't think I'm particularly good or bad at it, but it's a language which is there. Bengali I spoke at home. Kannada, now I'm in Karnataka for such a long time. I lived in Bangalore for many years. I have family in Karnataka, and of course, so you get all these languages. But the thoughts in each can often be very different, right? So while creating it is a different kind of thing.
When you're writing a play in Hindi, are you thinking in English and translating it?
No, not at all. Okay. When I'm writing in Hindi, I'm thinking in Hindi. When I'm writing in Bangla, I'm thinking in Bangla. When I'm devising in or writing in English, I'm thinking in English.
But typically you have like a primary language that you think in, right? And then when you're speaking, maybe you're doing a translation.
I don't think so, actually. No? I think till my generation, and I think even now in India, many people are multilingual. Quite naturally, we are all You speak to in one language with your parents, one language in your neighborhood, one language in school. So this much is there. This multilingualism is not the multilingualism of the West. Because in the West, when you're multilingual, but in the West, I mean in Europe or America, when you're multilingual, you are multilingual because you've learnt, there is like a primary and then there are secondary languages. Like in school, you have learned Spanish as the second language.
Yeah, French.
Yeah, that's not the same thing as learning Hindi or Urdu or Bengali in your neighborhood or with your family and going and learning English in school. Right?
It's consuming content, watching Hindi movies, reading books.
It's a totally different thing. You know? Like I remember when I grew up in Delhi, right? So when the first time I was doing shows in Bombay, I was with a crew from Bombay. And I realized that they are completely amused at my Hindi. They have figured that, okay, their Hindi is totally different from my Hindi because they have this own thing. They have their own, now for instance, because I've worked in Bombay a lot, I sort of know what to say. But even within Hindi, there are so many kinds of Hindi, right? So that is one thing. In terms of staging plays, I think it's really most fun for me to watch when it is in the natural language of the audience. So the audience is Hindi speaking and you have a Hindi play. The audience is Kannada speaking, then there is not that plays should not travel outside. I think it's very important for plays to perform outside of their region and outside of their language. And one gets a lot. Like the theatre is its own language. It's not just the spoken word. Like theatre is its own form. It's actually not a music plus text plus sound. It's not the sum of the parts. It has its own logic. But I enjoy it very much, when my Hindi play is running in a place where there are Hindi speakers in the audience. Some of the best shows I have seen are when we are performing in Gorakhpur or Allahabad or somewhere, where the audience is cued into every little word of the play. When you translate it to English, I think if there are English audiences, of course they can connect to it. But if you do an English play in Gorakhpur, there is a distance, there is a gap.
But you're saying if a Tibetan play performed in German to a German audience is far better than a Tibetan play performed in the Tibetan language with subtitles?
Well, with the Tibetan play, it's different. Only with certain languages, because the political contest is about language, right? A Tibetan play in Tibetan anywhere in the world is better than a Tibetan play in any other language. Because you don't get to hear Tibetan. Tibetan as a language is being wiped out.
You're conveying a message by just housing that play in
By
Tibetan.
just the fact that you're hearing, one of the fascinating things about the Tibetan production of Pah-La is that when they were speaking, and I was looking at the subtitles, the English subtitles, because we opened in India and we performed many shows in India. I was looking at the English subtitles. I realized that they have a Tibetan word for every word that I have written. So can you imagine, like there is train, there is weather, there is telephone, there is... Now in Hindi also you have words, but you don't really use them. You don't say Durbhash. You say telephone. Right? It would be absurd. It would be forced if inside a place suddenly somebody said Durbhash. You can say rail gadi for train, but a lot of people would just use train. Right? It would have to be a very specific world or time in the play for somebody to say rail gadi. A character of a certain generation or some will say rail gadi. But in the Tibetan play, and we were performing to Tibetan audiences all the time. We performed a lot of Tibetan settlements, apart from, the usual Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore thing. People came with their own chairs. When the auditorium got filled, they came with their own chairs from their houses. They sat down and they watched the play. And they had no difficulty because they had a word for everything that was written in English. So Tibetan is a very unique situation. And I think that applies to maybe many other languages in the world where the language itself is being politically wiped out or being contested. But in all kind of dominant languages, I would think if you watch a Hindi play in Germany, the way it would land would be very different if you did it in Hindi. Now, we have to keep in mind that the actor's body is a very big part of the theatre. Right? And how you use your body completely changes with the language. So, an actor who has grown up in Lucknow and is Hindi speaking, when that actor performs a Hindi speaking character versus an actor who's grown up in Freiburg and has doing the play in Germany, a very good actor in German language, might be able to convey the text well, but the body is very different.
You said sharir badal jata hai.
Total, completely, I mean, you can see it anywhere. When people have an argument, so easily we slip into our mother tongue. Right?
Even you said the audience ka sharir badal jata hai. When they're watching a Hindi play, audience sits a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we have, at least in India, English is still a language which is which brings a kind of class consciousness to it. No? English is the language of a certain kind of...
You're educated.
Sophisticated. And elite. So we have these kind of... you watch a play in English and you are sort of, watching it in a certain way. I think the Britishness of what was 20 years ago has moved now to a kind of Americanness. Now children in schools, I think they speak Netflix. They don't speak English or Hindi or Bangla. They speak the language of Netflix. You can listen to a 10-year-old and say whether they have Netflix at home or not. Immediately, you can tell. Right? Which is just a reality, which is where they are right now. So the audience, it watches differently, I think. Different kinds of things.
What else can shape the story that I'm writing? You've often said that when you sit down to write, the default theatre you have in mind is the Rangashankara in Bangalore. What if I'm thinking of a different theatre? Does the size, shape, layout of a theatre, can that influence where the story is going? So if I'm thinking of the Rangashankara, if I'm writing a play with another theatre in mind, would that change where the story goes?
Maybe form, not so much where the story goes, but maybe form. I used to think of the Rangashankara as my default. Now it's changed because I've been out of Bangalore for such a long time. It still is my most favorite theatre and I still consider it to be my theatre home. But there was a time where really it was embedded in my mind. I'd done 100+ shows in Rangashankara as an actor, as a writer, as a director. So it was just like my default stage. I don't think it's like that now. I think now I'm more flexible. I can think of a space because I've also toured a lot more than I had 20 years ago. So when you tour, you become more flexible with your the concept of dramatic space. But at least when one is starting out, I think if it's very useful to have a theatre space in one's mind where you are going to stage your plays. Even actors really. If you know that here are your 4 friends or your cousins who are going to be in the play, it really helps to write, I think, plays. To know that, okay, this is going to be performed by this person. It is useful, I think. Eventually, it may or may not be. But just to think about it, it's a good thing.
You said something interesting. I wanted to finish this loop about what can influence the story, but you spoke about the audience that shows up in India. And if they speak English, there's maybe some form of class connotation to it. Let's dive into what place theatre occupies in Indian pop culture. Is it still viewed as a stepping stone for the film industry? Or do you think it's established itself as a behemoth in its own right? In America, for example, many Hollywood mainstream blockbuster actors, they look forward to a stint on Broadway because there's a recognition that it's a different art form and a difficult art form. And much more difficult than taking multiple takes on a movie set. And if they're able to do that stint, they know for a fact they will come out of it having refined their craft a lot more, a better actor, and they have this badge to show that, oh, I've done a Broadway stint. Do you think in India there's a similar perception of theatre, or do you think it's still viewed as a stepping stone? Because you don't see that many, at least Hindi film actors, come back to theatre, even if they started off.
Yeah. It depends on where you are. I mean, in Manipur, theatre is not a stepping stone to cinema.
Okay.
And Manipur has potentially one of the greatest theatre cultures in the world. You have some of the best directors of the last century came from there. I think in Bengal it is sort of 50-50, maybe in Kerala maybe 50-50. Kerala's theatre influences cinema and cinema influences theatre in a very big way. Kerala cinema is very interesting for that reason as well. I think where you find this kind of stepping stone business the most is in Bombay.
Right.
Right, because it is the film industry and people want to be seen and there are so many actors and they want to do plays because they're also there are just so many actors. So that is a good thing and people, hence you have audiences also and this. So it depends on where you are and what it is. I think in Punjab, theatre has its own place. India has so many different types of theatre in different places that Bombay's theatre is like one part of this whole thing. Its visibility is probably high, globally, because the visibility of those actors in film is high. Film as a medium, obviously, as a recorded medium, has greater visibility than a non-recorded medium. And hence it makes a certain kind of livelihood possible in cinema, which is not possible always in the theatre, especially for actors, right? They get paid, actors can get paid several times what they get paid for a run of shows for doing a 3-minute advertisement.
And that's never going to change, right? Because it's a scale issue.
It's a scale issue. It's a recorded versus this kind of thing. Unless, of course, you have places like Germany or Russia where theatre is considered to be a thing that is so vital to society that the government subsidy is massive. In Germany, if you see, theatre actors are theatre actors. You can have a completely reasonable life being a theatre actor in Germany because it's a job which is funded, you get housing, you get contracts of 5-6 years. And that's because in that society, they have reason to value theatre in the same way. In India, we have a strange relationship to culture. Like, see, everybody in South India, in sort of upper caste South India, will want their daughters to learn Bharatanatyam. For what? It's not some great love of art or anything, no? It's that the girls should know Bharatanatyam. It's like this kind of thing. That's the logic behind it. It's not that they are trying to inspire some sense of rasa or bhava or... It's not like that.
Some extracurricular activity.
Some extracurricular, something good in the marriage market later on. The son knows some poetry, the daughter knows Bharatanatyam. This type of thing.
Only do it till it doesn't intrude upon your studies, and when it's time to get serious, stop
Correct.
it.
So that is there. But see, the Bharatanatyam industry, so to speak, which is people teaching Bharatanatyam at home, 10 girls come and learn Bharatanatyam, so on and so forth, is such a gendered industry for this reason. The number of Bharatanatyam dancers who are male are far less than female. Also because learning the art has really got nothing to do with learning the art. It's got to do with, your gender and marriage and this type of thing. So I think even in theatre, it, in different states is different motivations to do things. I agree in the sense that I think Bombay's theatre, it is very much a stepping stone. But also, Maharashtra has very solid Marathi theatre. Like really hardcore, some of the greatest playwrights of our country have been from Maharashtra. Some of the greatest directors, actors. And now actually, if you see in Bombay, I work in Bombay regularly. I work with a lot of actors from Bombay. There are so many shows. There is a boom, Every show is houseful. Every day there are 10 shows in Andheri, only in Andheri, forget anywhere else. And people are flocking to the theatre. I don't think we have had a show which has not been houseful in last 2 years. I don't think we've had a single show that is not houseful. Every time we have mounted a show, it has been houseful. So that's a huge thing. I don't think that is only because of people who want to make it to cinema. I think there is so much content right now which is recorded. Your Netflix and Amazon, and people are spending so much time online not being able to decide what to watch. The fact that there is a place where they can switch off from everything and just have real humans do something, tell them a story, is clearly becoming even more lucrative than it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting how this cycle has come
Yes.
back. I guess this leads us into a broader question about the purpose of theatre. Habib Tanvir had once said, theatre should reflect the problems of society, not serve as escapism. And you've shared a story in the past where you met this boy in Kashmir who kept quoting the works of Bertolt Brecht to you. And then he invited you to join him in his drama class. And when you were observing those boys, you felt that plays have so much more power than just throwing stones, which is also what they did in their free time. And you've said a flag and a play are fundamentally at odds with each other. One is a symbol and the other a nuance. This, in my view, is the reason why regimes are so opposed to literature and drama. Nuance is ultimately the greatest enemy of nationalism. You've explored India's role as an occupying force in Kashmir in the Kashmir trilogy, the Djinns of Eidgah, Rizwaan, Gasha. You've explored the Tibetan non-violent struggle in Pah-La. You've explored Hindu right-wing ideology in Mukti Dham. What role does theatre play? Is it meant to send a message? Because we brought up these analogies with comedy. The schools of thought that say you can't detach comedy with politics. Comedy is political. You have to punch up. You have comedians like George Carlin, Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, recent examples, who believe in this philosophy. And then you have comedians who say that's putting too much of a burden on comedy. It doesn't really have to send a message. It can exist. Comedy can just be, it can be goofy, slapstick, doesn't matter. What about theatre? Should it always be subversive? Should it reflect the problems of society? Should it be a mirror? Or do you think that's putting too much of a burden on theatre? It can be mindless, it can be escapism. What do you think?
I don't think it should be ever one thing. I don't think any art should ever have only one principle of what it should be. It would be terribly boring to start with if that was the case. I also don't think that there is any text which is without a context. You wake up in the morning and you pick up a brand of toothpaste. It has a name, it has certain colors, it has a price, which has been decided by a bunch of people who are getting paid in an office so that you pick up this toothpaste and not some other toothpaste. It's not an innocent object. There are no innocent objects. You name a child something, you immediately have imposed, if Ram, Rahim, Richard, Joe, whatever it is, you have imposed history, culture, gender, phalana, etc. It's all there. So there is no such thing as, we cannot escape meaning. Meaning is present in all language, in all gesture, in all color, in all symbol. There is a reason why when you see a medical ward in an operation theatre, everybody has the same clothes. In a prison, everybody has the same clothes. You do not want to differentiate. You don't want to lie down in an operation theatre and think, okay, a Muslim doctor is coming. A Hindu doctor is... You don't want to think that. You just want to know, okay, there is a cardiovascular surgeon who's doing my thing, right? There is a meaning in what that dress being the same, right? So I'm saying that just the way theatre absolutely should not have the burden of carrying questioning, let's say, carrying questions. I don't think it should have that. But at the same time, everything invariably has that burden. And I think it's really important for adults in this world, as we grow up, to understand that the world is not innocent toys. There is a reason why the blonde Barbie sells more than the black Barbie. It's not a coincidence. There is a reason why Shakespeare is more popular than Tawfiq al-Hakim. And it's not just about writing.
It's not just his skill.
It's not just his skill.
There's
Shakespeare is a great writer, but so is Tawfiq al-Hakim. But there is a difference in the cultural power that exists in each of those languages and what has been promoted and what has been sent. Nothing to take away from one writer or the other, but we have to understand this. So sometimes a play might directly question. Sometimes it may not question. It might be a celebration of something. Like, in India we have Janmashtami, which is a huge festival, which is very dramatic. People make sets and, it is about Krishna's birth and it is a way of remembrance. It is a way of reflection. Or in the Muslim culture, you have the Taziyah, the Muharram's Taziyah, which is a remembrance of something, So every religion, what is the Sunday Mass? It is a theatre production, right? You go there and you have a story. There is a hero. You have books and songs that everybody can sing. It's a full-on. It's the world's most successful musical is Christianity, So, there is meaning in all this, which we must acknowledge. There is a wonderful thing in the Natya Shastra, which says that, I'm paraphrasing, but it says that a performance must question the gods, must tell us why are we here, and should entertain the drunk. This is an age-old treatise. So I don't think the theatre is one or the other. If it is not entertaining the drunk, if it's not funny, if it doesn't make us feel, I think it's pointless. So it has to do all these functions. It's not one or the other.
So this meaning can be inherent and can't be decoupled from theatre. But what about politics? Like, that is a conscious choice, right? You said questioning is not necessarily part, but your work has questioning and is often political. And like, there was a moment when you went to your program head at NYU and you said, I don't know what to teach because everything I've written has been shut down.
Yeah.
And your program head said, that's why you're here. There's clearly repercussions for the work you put out. And this is a conscious choice that you're making to make it political. So then how do you actually decide whether all the work you do has to send that message, has to have questions that you ask back, as compared to just writing maybe a play like A Boy Meets Girl when no one's going to get affected?
The thing is, Boy Meets Girl productions are extremely political. Right? Just imagine this for a second. I'll come to your question.
Romeo and Juliet?
Yeah, Romeo and Juliet. You are doing, let's take a popular film, a Hindi film, just for the sake of, and then we can also do a brief on an English film. Let's take Sholay, okay? What is the great thing about Sholay? It's a great story. One boy dies in the end, one man dies, one lives. So you have a tragedy and a comedy at the same time. You will get the death, so you're satisfied with the tragedy. And you will also get the couple coming together, Dharmendra and Hema Malini come together, you get the marriage story. So you're satisfied, right? Now let's look at one basic thing about Sholay. Let's say if Gabbar Singh was not a dacoit, right? What would he do? What are the other poor people doing in that village? Thakur has a house. He's a landlord. He doesn't have hands, but he has a pakka house. He has a servant. He has horses. He has a swing. What are the rest of the people doing? They all have mud houses. They are all poor. They don't have land. They weave and do things like that. So your choice is either to be one of those people or to be a daku. What else can you do? Right? So if you now think about it, what is so wrong with being Gabbar Singh?
No one's presented the case for Gabbar Singh before.
So it's not a crazy thing, that he is a dacoit. In that society,
it's not his fault.
Will be,
Society led him to be Gabbar
So
Singh.
you can say that, okay, why
Stand
did
up for Gabbar.
But there is one scene in Sholay, the only scene in Sholay which is in slow motion. Do you remember which scene that is?
No.
There is one scene in which Gabbar Singh kills Thakur's family. Do you remember that film when his children are the mother is his son and son, his with the children are in the swing, and then Gabbar Singh arrives, and that scene is in slow motion. What that scene does is that it tells us that he is evil. He actually kills children. He kills women who are in the house. He kills people who are not hurting him. He is killing people who are not shooting at him. That scene is in slow motion. You remove that scene from Sholay and watch it. You will invariably think about the fact that actually what is the difference between Gabbar Singh and Pan Singh Tomar?
He's like Robin Hood.
He's like Robin Hood. What is the problem? But that scene tells us that, look, the problem is that he is evil. Right? He is this kind of guy. So it is a hugely political film because it is asking us for 2.5 hours, I love Sholay by the way, to suspend, to forget the class differences, to forget that if I was in that village, I would have nothing to do except being a weaver, right? I wouldn't even have my own horse. The only way I could have a horse is but this guy has everything.
You're more likely to be Gabbar than...
I'm more likely to be A.K. Hangal and that, I'm more likely, how can I become even Gabbar? As a common
join
person,
his team because...
I would be a nobody, right? But you forget about this when you're watching Sholay, right? You just follow this. Now come to English films. Watch Rambo. So popular. That guy goes to Vietnam alone. He goes alone. He has a dagger and he has a red bandana. And he indiscriminately kills people and he rescues Americans and brings back home. In Rambo part 3 or 4 somewhere, he has like 10 minutes of remorse. So now what happened to why are those people in America there? What happened to napalm bombs and killing millions of people? And like, why is America in the Vietnam War? What happened to Muhammad Ali? Like, none of that is there. Now you might know all of this. Your news might be saying this. Imagine if you were alive at that time. News might be saying this. Your newspaper is saying this. You might know neighbors whose children have been drafted into the army and have been sent. But you will watch Rambo and for 2.5 hours or 2 hours, whatever that is, part 1, part 2, अच्छा उसमें तो part भी है. Sholay तो at least is one part. You are watching different parts in which this guy is going and he's such a great soldier because he's American and he's white that he can finish off Vietnamese people like that and he goes to finish his Russians like that. If this is not propaganda, then what is propaganda? Right? These are all political films. The only difference between this and what I'm doing or people like me are doing is that they are asking the question that, okay, what will happen to that person who's in the village? What will happen to that Vietnamese guy?
You're shifting the perspective from the sniper to the person
and
being
actually,
sniped.
I'm doing the traditional thing. This is the most traditional thing to do in theatre. Right? You go back to theatre 2000 years ago, in any culture, the Romans, the Greeks, the Japanese, the Indian, all of them will have plays in which you will question the king, you will question the gods, you will question... Theatre, traditionally, has been on the side of the weak. Not on the side of the strong.
Then why is your work being shut down?
Because it is on the right side of history. I don't mean to say that do I not watch Sholay, do I not watch Rambo? I find it absolutely entertaining. I can totally watch it. I'm just saying that it's not as innocent as we think it is. It's not that this work, that Antigone or Beckett's Waiting for Godot, I'm talking about like people who have written much greater work than I have, or Carnard, that these people are somehow doing something political and questioning or changing society, or asking society to make meaning, whereas Rambo and Sholay are not. They're also doing the same thing, but they're on the side of the powerful. They are on the side of whoever is in command. You see Russian films from Stalinist times. They look exactly like, Rambo. Because they are always correct. Nobody can question anything. So now, of course, not all my work is like that. A lot of my work is, again, questioning, but of different kinds of questions. I think a human being has different types of questions in their life, which is interesting for me as a maker. But I think it is really important to note that what are you interested in as an artist for anybody? It doesn't have to be like me or like the maker of Rambo or like, it's really about what is your personality. What is it that you can spend 3 years of your life with? Because no play gets written in one day. No draft is ready, no film gets made. You really spend a lot of time, as you know, in that work. You have to be invested in it. So it has to somehow be true to your own personality and what you are interested in.
When you were writing the Kashmir trilogy, well, 2 of them that you wrote or performed in the third one, and also when you're writing about Pah-La or Mukti Dham, deep inside you have to know that this is going to get shut down at some point. These are not plays that are going to run in these environments, right? Were you aware of it?
I was... see, all of them have got shut down and all of them are still performing.
Like, if they were not shut down, there would have been no reason to write plays like these, right?
Not shut down. I knew that there is going to be friction. Yeah, there's definitely going to be friction. And like I said, I'm interested in the dialogue with my people, Look, I'm not writing plays for my government. I'm writing plays for my society.
That's where you lost them.
The government is coming in between me and my society, right? See, in NYU Abu Dhabi, we have something great happened to me, which is that last 3 years, I had the opportunity to teach with Sholay, who is, the 1986 Nobel laureate in literature and great African writer. Once I was hauled up to a police station in Bangalore, many years ago, 7 years ago, I think. And I had to write a letter or some such thing about why did I write this play. And I had quoted Sholay in that. I had never met Sholay. I didn't know him. I quoted him. I never knew that one day I will get to be in the same room as him. Forget about being in the same program as him. I was so relieved to have met him and then spent so many years with him to realize that he is 10 times more defiant than I am. He spent a year in jail in Nigeria. People still write all kinds of things about him, but he's very sure of his role in society as a Nigerian, as an African, as a black playwright. He's very sure that there are some questions that only he can ask from his position, which is very relieving for me because I think many of us, all of us, can only come from our own context, right? We can ask questions that make sense to us. There are certain questions about Hinduism that I can ask, which I wouldn't be able to ask if I did not grow up in India. I just simply wouldn't know what those questions are, right? So one is also doing one's job in that sense. Governments always try to shut down art. It's not a new thing at all. I once met these 2 artists in Prague, painters, who had come from, after the collapse of the Berlin Wall, they thought they were now free to make anything. So they came to Prague and started a studio.
Same side, they had 2 halves, right?
Now, yeah.
One started making caricatures.
One started making, he had a puppet which was drawn.
Right, the puppet, yeah.
So, before the collapse of the Berlin Wall, they were subjugated by the communists. After the collapse of the Berlin Wall, they had to negotiate the market. So, if you are an independent thinker of any kind, at any point of time in history, you will be met with resistance. It is a fact of life. That is why you are an independent thinker. So you have to accept it and you have to go with it.
So many questions I could keep asking you. This has been a fascinating masterclass, playwriting for dummies, but
Thank you.
running out of time. So hopefully maybe we do a part 2 at some point. But I think this is a good starting point to write my second play, not my first play. Let's start wrapping up. Before we move into the closing questions, I would love it if you can tell me what I've built with the Lego. What do you think this is?
I think you built some kind of industrial town.
Yeah. What does it look like? What are the different elements? Let's see.
It looks like an industrial town to me. It looks like you have, from this angle.
You can play around with it.
Yeah, I mean, I have to turn it this way. Yeah, it looks like an industrial town. It looks like there is a factory. It actually looks like a factory in many ways, with a gate. And you can go in and there's a plant here and there's a place to take out the industrial waste and the smoke. Yeah.
Masterpiece. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, exactly.
Is that what you made? While we
Who knows? Who knows? But if it's an industrial town or a factory, that's what it's meant to be. Last 4 questions. What are some books, movies, role models that have strongly inspired you? Recommendations.
Books. I think there's a great book which I recommend all the time. It's called In Jail with Hikmet, which is a book written by this fabulous Turkish writer called Orhan Kamal, a short story writer. Orhan Pamuk is actually named after Orhan Kamal. And when Orhan Kamal was 17 or 18, they found the government found some communist literature on him. He was not a communist, he was just interested in what communism was. And he was put behind bars. And he was very disappointed because he wanted to be a writer. And he thought he'll go to university. But he realized that, I'm in jail, so now what will happen? So there were 3 beds in his jail. One was empty in his cell. 2 were occupied. He was there was another guy. After some days, there was a celebration in the jail because the poet Nizam Hikmet was transferred to this jail. Okay. And when Nizam Hikmet was transferred, he was getting transferred every now and then because they didn't want to keep him in one place. And Nizam Hikmet was Orhan Kamal's hero, his favorite writer and all that. And Nizam Hikmet got transferred to Orhan Kamal's cell on the 3rd bed. So Orhan Kamal couldn't believe his luck. That, my God, I'm with my hero. And so he asked Nizam Hikmet, will you teach me how to write? So it's about Nizam Hikmet training Orhan Kamal in jail. It's a fabulous book. Anybody who wants to be an artist, writer, an independent thinker, I think it's a good book to read. In Jail with Hikmet. There are the Satyajit Ray books, which I think are great. Our Films, Their Films is a great book. My Years with Opu is a great book. In fact, Orhan Kamal has a new book called Memories of Distant Mountains, which is a fabulous book. It's a diary of his over 10 years. They've edited it, of course, which has drawings and writing. It really gives you a wonderful view of an artist's full life. And it's very inspiring because it's not like, only art is happening with him. There is life happening. He's having to do things. People are falling ill and, he's moving. So you see a kind of normal life thing with him. So these are some of the books I think which can be interesting. The other book that comes to my mind is a book called 6 Lessons in Drawing by William Kentridge, the South African artist. It's a book where he starts by talking about the artist as a philosopher, then about the history of your neighborhood, then about the history of your family, all the way to your bookshelf. What is in your bookshelf? So it's such a beautiful book which frames all the different things one can dip into in order to create a piece of art. What I'm inspired by is, of course, a lot of music. Hindustani, I listen to a lot of classical music, Hindustani and Western. I think my first love is actually music. I think it's like music is to arts what physics is to science. Everything, any process to happen.
Starts from music?
I think it starts from music. It has to make, any temporal art. Not, of course, there are spatial arts like sculpture, and that's a bit different. One can also argue that they are also inspired from music, but I don't know. I think the work of Satyajit Ray, hugely influential. I grew up around the band Indian Ocean when I was in college, and Shushmit's guitar playing over the years had a huge influence on me. Him as a person, actually, more than, of course, his music, but I think musicians are above me. I always think musicians are like this godly figures that I cannot reach. But I think reading about Shushmit, listening to Indian Ocean, that's really inspiring for me. What else did you ask about books and
movies?
Movies.
Recommendations.
Yeah. I was talking about Satyajit Ray's films, which I think most Bengalis have seen those, but others, it's available very easily online with subtitles.
Who was or is the greatest playwright of all time?
There cannot be one person. My most favorite playwright is Mohan Rakesh, the Hindi writer.
Why?
I think because Mohan Rakesh's range is unmatched. He wrote very few plays, 4 or 5. He wrote a very classical play like Ashadh Ka Ek Din, which is actually a very modern look at relationships, but set in the time of Kalidasa. But he wrote a play like Aadhe Adhure, which was set in a modern time and formally very interesting. It's the story of one woman and one man plays various men in that. They are not similar at all, these two plays. Then he has Lehro Ke Rajhans. So he's just these 3 plays, Lehro Ke Rajhans, Ashadh Ka Ek Din and Aadhe Adhure, are each like master classes of writing plays. And they are completely different in style. They have very modern preoccupations. But his modernity, I think great artists are they come with their own modernity. They challenge us with what is modern. They don't necessarily come with ideas of their field. They have new ideas about modernity, which is what you find in every great artist, whether in music or painting or... I think Mohan Rakesh is that person for me in playwriting. I think in the West, Tony Kushner is like that. He has ideas. Or Paula Vogel is an American writer, great. Gao Jingjian in China was an extraordinary playwright. Ota Shogo in Japan. I think these are all visionary playwrights who have changed the language of theatre with their work. And not just in terms of the kind of subjects, but the language itself. What can you do in the theatre changed because of these. Dario Fo from Italy. From here, people like Sadala Vanus, their contribution to Arab theatre is extraordinary, the kind of plays Sadala Vanus wrote. So yeah, I think these are some of the visionaries. But
what would you like your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
I would not want to be remembered at all.
Why?
I wouldn't want people to waste like one day of their life remembering me.
Remembering your work, maybe?
Remembering my work, yeah, if it is valid. But it's not something that I think about. I have no real... I keep thinking that I meet people who don't know Sachin Tendulkar. I find it baffling that people don't know Sachin Tendulkar, The way, I'm giving a very mundane example, but I think Sachin it's like literally a god to 1 billion people, And I meet people now who don't remember him. So I don't expect anybody to remember me if they don't remember Sachin Tendulkar. Although, sports and arts are different things. Arts grow with time. I think it's not important that people remember me. I think it's a very old conception and pompous conception that people used to have, that people should remember me. We see more of the universe today. We know so much more about the universe than we knew even 20 years ago. And you see that human life is just really like not even a blip. It's not even an eyelid, bat of an eyelid. But I do hope that somehow whatever I am writing or whatever I am directing, it can create something so that others after me can take some of those ideas. They're still relevant either to question, maybe they have very good questions for me. Some of my students, it's extraordinary the kind of questions they ask about my work. Fantastic questions. Or they take it forward. I'm really interested in the way, the theatre will survive. The theatre has been there for as long as there is religion, there will be theatre. As long as there is subjectivity, there will be theatre. So whether I am remembered or not is not the point, but I hope some of these questions, they go on. And I really hope that some of my plays become irrelevant. I hope one day people read the Kashmir trilogy and go, oh, that's completely irrelevant now because there is peace in Kashmir. And there is equality and the conflict has been resolved. Or people read Muktidham one day and say, okay, kind of Hinduism has found some shape in 100 years where it's not a radical position only. There are also other positions. So that I hope some of my plays which are like this, they become irrelevant.
Hope so. Final question, easiest one. What is the meaning of life?
Oh my God, your easy question.
I'm sure you can ace this question.
No, I can't. I mean, what is the... my mother used to say something, which I should end with my mother. I think that's a good...
We started with your mother?
Yeah, we'll end with her. She used to say something wonderful to my sister and me. She used to say that, I don't know if there is meaning in life, but it's important that you give it meaning to be able to live. So I don't know the meaning of life. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's something. I'm not sure. But I think it's useful to give it meaning.
What meaning have you given it?
I think I have a meaning in terms of inquiry. I'm interested in inquiry. Pleasure. I do lots of things. I mean, I write and read and listen to music and, this is extremely pleasurable for me. I haven't had a single day in the theatre where I have faced the burden of the government or the censorship or going to jail or anything like that. All of that has happened to me, but I never wake up in the morning and remember that. I remember that, okay, I have to do this thing or whatever. And I think most recently, in the last 10 years or so, my daughter is turning 10 this year, I have found great meaning in being a father. I think that to me has been a very important part of my journey. I lost my father when I was very young. So I was very unsure of what a father does. Till some point, I realized that I can be a father like my mother was, because that was my father. And once that switch happened, I think I have enjoyed being a father for a lot. And that's something which gives me a lot of joy and meaning.
Yeah, great meanings. If people wish to connect with you, find out more about you or your work or watch your work, what is the best way to find you or your work?
I think online, if they do a search, they will find lots of things. A lot of the work is documented. There are interviews and these kind of things. And there is also the NYU Abu Dhabi page, which also has my email address. So they can connect right to me on that.
Multiple ways to find you and your work. Abhishek, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.